one of the interesting things that occurred in the history of Islam was the development of ilm al-hadith, and specifically in ilm al-hadith, or the study of hadith, is the techniques that the muhaddithun used for verification of information. When narrations are transmitted from one person to another, information is passed from one person to another, how do we verify that information? How do we make sure that that information is actually correct? And that topic definitely deserves its own video. But within that study of verification and information and who is trustworthy and who is not, there was at some point a subtopic that emerged, and that has to do with storytellers. Now, storytellers are given a general branding as people who are untrustworthy, people who are not to be taken from. And that's because at a certain point in the history of Islam, storytellers began using what seemed like authentic chains of narration in order to push stories that they had completely fabricated. And of course, this created a need for the scholars of hadith to debunk these stories and refute these fabricated narrations. So in response, you have many people that just came out and spoke against storytellers in general. And we have an interesting example of one such occurrence, wherein a storyteller is trying to use names of people who are known to the ummah, people who are trustworthy, people who are well recognized at that time, in order to push stories that were completely fabricated and false. And much of this was for their own personal gain. So Suyuti actually mentions this in his book, Warning Against Storytellers. But the original narration is actually taken from Al-Mawdu'at by Ibn al-Jawzi, and he quotes it directly from Ibn al-Jawzi. Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Tayalisi said that Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Yahya ibn Ma'in prayed in Al-Rasafa Masjid, and while they were there praying, a storyteller stood up, and the storyteller said that Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Yahya ibn Ma'in narrated to him from Abd al-Razaq, from Ma'mar, from Qatada, from Anas, a hadith from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So at that point in time, Yahya ibn Ma'in and Ahmad ibn Hanbal are in the masjid listening to a narration that they supposedly narrated. So Yahya looks at Imam Ahmad and Imam Ahmad looks at Imam Yahya ibn Ma'in. They begin looking at each other, and one of them asks the other, "Did you narrate this to him?" And he says, "No, wallahi, this is the first time I've heard of it." So when the man finished with his story, he collected some money from the people, and then he sat down to collect some more money. He was waiting for anybody else who might pass by and give him some money. So Yahya looked at him and he gestured for him to come over, and the man came thinking that Yahya was going to give him some money. So he said to him, "Who narrated this to you?" And he said, "Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Yahya ibn Ma'in." So Yahya ibn Ma'in said, "I'm Yahya ibn Ma'in and this is Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and we never heard of this from the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if you have to, then don't tell lies about us." So the man looked at him and he said, "You're Yahya ibn Ma'in?" He said, "Yes." He said, "I used to hear that Yahya ibn Ma'in was an idiot, but I never confirmed it until now." So Yahya ibn Ma'in, he said, "Really, and how is that?" He said, "As if there are no other Ahmad ibn Hanbals and Yahya ibn Ma'ins in this entire world. I have written from over 17 Ahmad ibn Hanbals and Yahya ibn Ma'ins." So Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he placed his sleeve over his face and he told Yahya bin Ma'in to let the man go. And the man stood up as if to mock them. This storyteller was not able to just stand up and tell any story. He was not able to just stand up and fabricate a hadith. He had to use names that were well known. So if we listen to the names that he called, these are all very well known names at that point in time. These were names that were respected, names that were known to the masses. And it just shows that the general populace of the Muslims at that point in time understood that information could not just be put out without verification. Unlike today, where you have individuals who have no trouble making up a hadith about Sahaba doing things that they never did, and joking and laughing about making up stories that never occurred. Now, while this story is funny in its own way, it shows us that because of incidents like this happening, Islamic sciences responded. And it responded in a way to preserve information, a way to preserve and verify narrations. And this is important not only in the historical aspect of information being passed on from one person to another, but this is very important in terms of preserving creed and methodology.